Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media. That's AMPIRE. It is always much appreciated. Today, I'm joined by my longtime pal, Mike Jones, who used to, of course, cover the Redskins, now covers the NFL for The Athletic. So it's good to have Mike stop by. I like to bring in some league-wide perspectives on what is going on with this team. And there's a couple things. Of course, the ownership situation. So Mike and I do talk about that, try to address some of the things going on. But then I also ask him about the Commanders, their offseason. Mike's job was to grade every transaction, basically free agent signing over the last couple of weeks. So what does he think of what the Commanders have done? The key is, and this is one thing that I think is going to be looking forward, not only have they improved, but how have they improved in relation to the other teams in the NFC East? So we talk about all of that. I talk about Lamar Jackson, or we talk about Lamar Jackson. Things that Mike thought that he felt like this team would go get, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, before we get there, I do want to go over a couple of things. And as a reminder, you can always read my work on ESPN.com. And the owners' meetings are coming up. I'll be out in Arizona Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Check it out. There could be some stuff coming out of there. Who knows? But that's what I want to get into. So here's what we know about the ownership situation. A new name emerged on Wednesday. Steve, I'm going to try and get this right. Apostolopoulos. I think that's right. Apostolopoulos just kind of rolls off the tongue. But he emerged as one of the other bidders in this process. So now we know three names of the bidding groups. It's Josh Harris, Tillman Fertitta, and now Steve Apostolopoulos. How's that? Three groups have toured the facilities. It's the Steve Apostolopoulos group, Harris, and then another unnamed group. And if you remember, I told you there were a couple unnamed groups in this whole equation that could factor into this. So we know one of them. Tillman Fertitta has not toured the facility. Now, what I do know is he was scheduled to tour it. And then I think it was several weeks ago, they had an event at FedEx for season ticket holders, I think to pick out seats or something like that. That was the day he was scheduled to attend or to tour. Didn't want to do it with a lot of people there. So he told them he'd reschedule, has not rescheduled as of yet. So we know three groups have toured, and there is another unnamed group in this process that I was going to say we don't know about, but that's by saying they're unnamed, says we don't know. Apostolopoulos is a Canadian billionaire, so he does a lot of real estate stuff, private equity, all that kind of stuff. So interesting times, but again, it's another name. Now, it's not like he's a new bidder, because my understanding is he toured the facility, I want to say it was about several weeks ago. I'll just say that, which means that he's been in this process for a while. It's just that his name kind of came out. And I think part of the reason it came out, he was looking into buying the Charlotte NBA Charlotte team from Michael Jordan. So I think that's where it started to come out. But anyway, now we know that he's one of the other names in this process. There's always going to be the Jeff Bezos stuff that's going to be kind of sticking around. And at this point in the process, every time I see his name, I don't necessarily think that it's I don't know where it's really at with him. I know what I've been told, the disdain that the Snyders have for him, but how much is that disdain worth? Does everybody have a price with it? Is it worth another $500 million? If he says here, would you take that? I can't answer that. But I do know that there's some people involved in this who always feel like whenever his name gets floated, it's designed for another reason. Is it designed to maybe get others to raise their price a little bit as hey, you know what? This guy's still out here. Maybe I could do this. So I don't know that on the Bezos side that there's a ton of optimism that he's like a legit player in this. I don't know, because I'm not in this. Nobody's involved. Very few people. There's only a couple of people involved in this whole process who really know what's going on. And I don't think it's anybody in the media, folks. Anyway, but I think like somebody kind of told me this analogy a couple weeks ago that they felt like Bezos was almost like the stadium equivalent of LA when teams were trying to get stadiums built in the past, they would always use, LA needs a team. maybe you could move there if you don't build a stadium. Well, obviously the LA threat is gone, but they wondered if Bezos, his name wasn't being used sometimes in that manner. I don't know. It just adds another layer to everything that's going on. Will this be wrapped up anytime soon as far as who we know who the new owner will be? Before, again, no vote until late May at the earliest, but could they announce it anytime? I think at this point I would just say at any time, right? But I don't know that, and I don't know that anything is imminent. Here's what I also know, and talking to some other groups that are involved that and who have been involved in these kind of things before, what typically happens is if a deal was done, they would know, because the person selling it would go to the other group and say, you're out, I'm selling to this guy. That hasn't happened. Now, the other thing could be that you enter into an exclusive process where it's like, we want to make a deal with you. And so now we're going to just kind of have this exclusive bidding process to see if they can get to a conclusion. If not, then it goes back to the others. Now, the other groups may not know if that's going on. So I don't know. That's a general statement. It's kind of vague, but it's just to give you a little bit of insight into the process. And my only point in that is, certainly there are some groups who have not been told that anything is done. So, just take that for what it's worth. So I think, again, I'll be out at the owners' meetings. I do believe Tanya Snyder will be there. It's not unusual. She's been representing the franchise. Her and some of the other attorneys have been representing the franchise certainly at all the last several meetings. I mean, she's been doing that for a while now, but I think some of the other attorneys might be there just to update the sales process, if nothing else. So we'll see. And I think the other thing that I always warn you about with this, and what others have warned me about, is like, with Dan, you never know. So that's what I have for you now. Again, I'll be out there, out in Arizona, sunny Arizona, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, leave Tuesday night. And I'll have some podcasts from out there. But now let's get to my conversation with Mike Jones from The Athletic. All right, Mike, thanks for coming on. And we have the owners' meetings coming up in a few days, and we'll both be out there. A lot of stuff going around with this team. First of all, and I had Barry Svaluga on the other day, and I asked him this too, because he's been around in DC for a long time. You cover this franchise, you know this owner. How surprised are you that we're at this point? And when did you fully believe we may hit this point?
I don't know exactly if there was a when I felt. I had thought, even, after the name change and the investigation stuff, I still thought he was going to dig in. But I think maybe, the point was when we were up in New York, and Jim Irsay was the first owner to say, I think it would be beneficial. It's best if we, look to have him sell. And that's when I was like, okay, because before I had been told, look, none of these owners are going to come out against him. They don't want to set a precedent and then be forced out themselves. But when Irsay said that, that's when it was like, oh, so maybe there is some opposition here. Maybe there are people who are really tired of this act and things might change. And it does seem like it's been a snowball, and it's picking up and picking up. And it looks like it's a matter of when, not if, Snyder will sell. But I tell you, there's still a lot of people who, as recently as the combine, one guy I talked to who had interviewed for the offensive coordinator position, I asked, just like, what have you heard? Like, what did they tell you when you're sitting down? And he was under the impression that Snyder was going to sell all but a few shares. So that way he still had a couple shares for his kids to pass on to them or whatever. That's what I guess was the hope or whatever. But I don't think that that's actually going to be the case.
Right.
I think that the NFL wants no parts of Snyder. I think, and I don't think that another owner who's coming in would even want that as well. And so maybe that was what the hope was, but it does seem like it's going to happen. It's just, we'll see when.
Right. And it's funny because you did hear a lot of things throughout this process about possible scenarios, but I can't imagine the NFL would have approved that kind of a situation.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because I mean, look, they want this investigation stuff to go away. I
Right.
mean, if he's still there, even owning, 3% of the
Right.
team, it's still a distraction. He's still part of it, and then you still have people clamoring for to release the details. I think they don't want to be in bed with this guy anymore.
Right.
And so even if he had decided, no, I'm not, we had heard, oh, he's not going to sell. I think they would have been like, if he said, I'm not selling, they would have been like, oh, yes, you are. And made sure that he was.
Well, how much do you think that they might be worried that if they push too hard, that he'll fight back in a harder way?
I mean, I think that there is enough support that they feel like they'll have the votes, but they don't want that because
Right.
then there's the risk of litigation and all that stuff. And nobody wants to go through that headache. So that's why they feel like, hey, it's better for everybody involved if you just voluntarily sell this thing. And you take your money and go, and we can go on with our business. Because I don't see any way that he survives this just because if it's not voluntarily, they'll force him out. But then it's just going to take longer. It'll drag on and on and on if they have to go that route.
I don't know that I could take another couple of years of litigation and excuse me and all that. You have, and my answer to this is going to be, I have no idea, but what's your expectation for owners meetings and what may be discussed, happen, anything? Do you have any sense?
I don't think that we're going to see a lot of movement. I think there'll probably be some updates. I mean, we're still hearing of new possible, prospective buyers coming out of the woodworks. Just as recently as what was that Wednesday?
Wednesday.
Um,
Now
yeah,
that guy toured the facility 3 weeks
right,
ago, so he's not really a new bidder. It's just a new
right.
name for the public.
Right, right. That's what I'm saying. So we're just hearing about new things. So I don't think that I still think there's time. The thing isn't just about to happen here next week. I know that there was some hope back at the last meetings in the fall that there was hope that this would be resolved by the spring. Ursay had even said that, but I don't think it's going to be then. From what talking to people, um, while it does seem like it's a matter of when, it doesn't seem like that when is next week. Maybe May,
Right.
I've been told, but again, that's a maybe.
As far
Uh,
as it being approved.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
But
there's
but
no chance next week it'll be approved.
no,
Right.
no, no. Maybe May is when we're
Right.
really close to something getting done. And I don't even know if that's the approval in May or if it's
Okay.
like, okay, but people said maybe May. But
Right.
it's such a maybe. Nobody for sure
Right.
knows
What
exactly how long. Or is he gonna hold out a little more and hope somebody else comes up with some more money? There's just so many moving parts. And it's not something that we go through a lot in covering,
right.
and it's not something that a lot of teams, even ownership groups, have a lot of experience with people selling teams. We've seen a few sold in the last several years, but we know the Panthers sold pretty quickly because their owner was like, boom, he felt the pressure to get rid of it, but it takes some time.
It does. And it's funny though, because it feels like it could take X or it could be boom
Yeah.
with this. And like in talking to people in the process, like it has not been a typical process. So they're just everybody's kind of prepared for anything at any time.
Right. Yeah. And you just expect there's going to be twists and turns and delays, and nothing is
Why would
ever
we
simple,
expect that?
right? Because we've seen it's like Gilligan's Island, different twists, same outcome, So just expect that there's going to be something wacky, something's going to hold something up. It's not going to be as simple and cut and dry as it should be.
How good, this fan base, this area. How good will it be for them when this is done?
Oh, I think it'll be huge because I know there are a number of fans who have stayed away, who have stopped following the team, but they still have a hole. They have a hole there. And I think if the ownership group changes, you've got hope. And I think people come back. I know it makes life easier for people like Jason Wright and his staff trying to market this team to the fans and to business partners. Just that whole stench, the investigation. Now, there still will be the fight to get those details released, but this franchise that will have a fresh start. Um, and that's something that I think that this fan base really needs. I think there's a lot of fatigue, and just so much disappointment. And so then you think, okay, maybe, the football gods will smile on us and we can finally get out of this cycle of just disappointment after disappointment and embarrassment after embarrassment. And it would be truly a new day.
When you talk, because you covered here, now you cover the league and have for several years now. How many years now has it been?
Um, let's see, it's been 6 years that I
Really?
was there. Yeah, I was 8 years out at the Post. So I covered the team for 9 years, and then 6 years I've been
Holy crap.
covering the league. Yeah.
Wow. So when you talk to people around the league about this franchise, what is it that, like, when they look to Washington, what do they ask you about this place? What is it that they say? Is there, do you get a, what is it? I mean, I know a lot of people around the league too. I mean, because they
Yeah.
all worked here at one point,
Right.
but what do
Right.
you hear?
Exactly.
And what do people, what is it? What's the reaction to people
Well,
around the league?
that's what I was about to say. A lot of the people I hear from,
It's the
it's like
same. Yeah.
they did it again,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
like, because it's from people who used to work here, just
Yeah.
like, some things never change. They
Yeah.
can't get out of their own way. It's never going to change until that guy at the top. And then you do hear from some that are, just like, is it really that bad there? Or what was it like there? Who do ask questions. But a lot of people, they're just not relevant. So you don't hear a whole lot. But the main that I hear from, and it's again, like that whole people from the coaching staff, front office, scouting department, they've spread out quite a bit. It's a lot of people, and a lot of them still keep tabs even though they're gone. And they're just like, it's like a train, it's that car wreck that you can't look away from. And even though they're gone, and so yeah, that's mostly it's like, you know, I don't think people realize. So a lot of people I hear from, it's thank God I'm gone. They're like, I didn't
Yeah.
realize how bad it
Yes.
was there until I got to another
Yeah.
franchise. And I
Yeah.
thought that everywhere operated like this. Well, it doesn't really work that
Right.
way. And we're so glad that we're other places. That's another thing I hear a lot of is like, wow, I didn't realize just how bad we had it.
Right.
Um, because they just thought that was just the NFL way. But no, the way of treating people, that's not what it was.
Right. And so that's why it's going to be huge to have a different set of leadership. But it also
Right.
feels like there are a lot of those ex-coaches now that I think this place mattered to them. And there are a lot of
Yeah.
ex-employees that I'll hear that from. They'll say, like, I loved working for that, or for the name, right? The Washington Redskins. It meant something to them. And then to see it be dismantled the way it has been, I think there was always I think a lot of people felt like they left something here of themselves. And so they still, like, I've talked to people like they'd like to see it turn around in a different situation.
Yeah, it was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears
Yeah.
poured into it. I think that even though ownership and they weren't treated well, I think that they felt like they were kind of like, we're in this for each other. Um, and they also there are still some people who are still left, and so they feel for their friends that are here.
Mhm.
And so yeah, and they also know the area and just how badly this fan base wants to win and how badly the
Right.
fan base has wanted to believe and keeps on coming back. And I know numbers have dropped, but there still has been that desire. And I think also there's a group of people who have been here who remember that 2012 season
Yeah.
and just how that second half of the 2012 season, just how electric it was, how it felt in the building, how it felt in the city, driving around, seeing, the flags flying on people's cars and just knowing that, man, like it looked so good. And then it didn't last. And just knowing how this franchise and the city could be, I think that does make them, they're gone and they're glad to be gone, but they would be happy if Snyder was gone and if the franchise and the fans could finally experience quality and success from new leadership.
One of the questions I get a lot, I'm going to turn to on-field stuff because we talk about this, right? But I think let's get to the on-field in a minute. The last thing is the name, the Commanders. So the lobby, obviously, the fan base is not connected to that name. And I get a lot of, oh, hope the new owner comes in and brings a new name. And I did ask somebody here about that. And they're like, they didn't think there was any chance of that happening, regardless of who the owner is. Do you ever hear anything about that? Have you ever talked to anybody in the league about that? I can't imagine, because my thinking, well, first of all, as I said, somebody here who was involved in that process thought there'd be no way. But the other thing is, at what point, what if you get another name and not everybody agrees? And so what does the NFL do then? And it would be how many new names can you get? But anyways, have you ever?
No, I haven't really talked about that with anybody. I have heard, I've seen that on Twitter and
Yeah.
people saying hopefully they bring a new name or whatever. But I just haven't dug into that as far as I would be surprised. Just because I mean it takes a while to get a new name and all the copyright and trademark stuff and everything like that. And I just, again, like you said, I don't know if you're ever gonna totally find a name that makes everybody happy. The NFL just wants, no dysfunction, no controversies, and good football. Who cares what the name is? I
Right.
think that's what matters most right now to them. Now, if the new owner came in and wanted to, then okay, but I don't think it's something that they would be pushing.
No, I think it'd be awfully hard. I don't think the NFL wants to go through another year of this franchise changing its name
Right.
and the cost involved and all, this and that. And, and again, what happens if the fan base doesn't like the next one? What do they
Right.
do? So that's always a risk, and who knows? I haven't talked to anybody in the league about it, but
Yeah.
I think the bigger thing is what people should be worried about is, can they improve the on-field product? Because if you don't, you're going to be in the same spot. I mean, look at the Washington Wizards. That name is ridiculous. But if they won, all right, but it's 20 years in and or whatever it is, and it's still a bad name. But anyway, let's get to one of the things you had to do for the Athletic was, as you were saying earlier before we came out, is grade of the free agency moves. When you look at what Washington did, weren't very loud, but what did you think of what the Commanders did?
I thought that they had a smart approach. I know people would have liked if they had spent more money or done something dramatic, but they did, I thought, meet some needs along their offensive line. And look, they're not in a good spot because of the ownership and the sale and everything like that. So they couldn't really break the bank. But I thought they got some quality, linemen to fortify that. I thought getting Jacoby Brissett was a good move because I'm sorry, I don't believe in Sam Howell, not yet. Like he maybe could be, but I think it was really dangerous to go into the season with him as basically, him and some, I don't know. I just feel it was smart to get a quality veteran, and Jacoby Brissett is respected around the league for his ability, for his leadership, for just the way he carries himself. So he'll be good for Howell. I wouldn't be surprised, if he winds up starting. But we don't know what the leash on Howell is going to be.
Right.
We've seen so many times that a backup quarterback looks really good, and then the defenses get some film on them, and then they struggle. But the fact that they have somebody who knows his role, who is going to carry himself as a professional, whether he's starting, whether he's backing up, and then he's going to be ready to jump in and start and play at a pretty good, good level. He's not, elite or anything like that, but he can be serviceable if you need him to. I think that's good. That's the kind of veteran you need, and not somebody who's basically hanging on for one more paycheck and can't throw the ball 15 yards down the field. Not somebody who, is very green, just like your starter, but a guy who's, been in the battles. And a lot of people felt like he did a very good job with what he was dealt in Cleveland. I thought that was probably, I know he's not a starter, on paper right now, but I thought that was probably one of their best moves that they made in free agency.
Yeah, and because the floor to me is higher if he comes in, certainly, and he's an upgrade. I mean, I enjoyed Taylor Heineke, but Brissett I think is a solid, would be if he has to play. He doesn't turn the ball over a lot. I think for a team that has a good defense and wants to run the ball like they do, I think he could fit well if he has to go play. And it's a good insurance policy for Howell. And it's a guy who's respected, he'll be respected in the locker room. So I think that I agree with you. I think we had to do like an under the radar signing, and that was mine. I don't know that a quarterback's under the radar, but I think what he gives you is really good. And I think
Right.
that was a good signing for that reason. Did they because the other thing is, I look at that and I can say, you can ask, well, has this team improved? Well, I think they probably have, but the question then becomes, how have they improved in relation to the rest of the NFC East? What have you thought about what the rest of the NFC East has done? And I know, like, so much, there's so long to
Yeah.
go.
Right.
There's so much
Right.
rides on Howell's development and so
Mhm.
much rides on like health and all that. So people can calm down at this time of the year with that discussion because you don't know. But right now, how have you viewed the rest of the NFC East in terms of their level of improvements?
I feel like the Eagles have taken a step back, possibly, because they lost a lot in free
Yeah.
agency, especially on their defense. Um, I felt like the Giants took some steps forward. The Cowboys, um, they probably improved a little bit. I don't know that Washington dramatically improved.
Mhm.
Um, I think that again, there's some improvement, um, just from the quarterback situation, from the offensive line situation. You know, but it's so early. But if you look at them, I still feel like they're probably the fourth best team in the league in the district. Think about high school sports
High school.
uh, division. And that doesn't mean that they can't like put some things together, have a good draft, and take some strides. But just if you had to do it on paper right now, when you look at what the Giants did, the continuity they're going to have with Daniel Jones and Saquon, and then adding some more weapons around them, and you look at Dallas getting some help. I think Brandon Cooks, and then obviously Stephon Gilmore. So they've gotten some key pieces on both sides of the ball. Washington, it's the still gradual assembly, and so that's why I kind of think that they're probably improved, but everybody didn't pull away from them. But I didn't see them leapfrogging anybody.
Right. And I think and again, to me, the whole thing is, what does Sam Howell do?
Right.
And if Brissett does have to play, but there is a ceiling to me when you have Jacoby Brissett.
Right. Right.
And so like, but what, and I think the other part is they weren't far from where the Giants were. I mean, they
Yeah.
really should have won the first game. They were in control of that. And then the second game, I mean, those teams are pretty even. So there's not a lot of margin for error for a couple of those teams. But yeah, I think I think there's a leap of faith, and they have to hope that Howell progresses. And plus, the impact of the enemy. What do you think that will do for this offense? And to me, there's a natural transition period. But what do you think? What do you think of his impact?
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. And going real quick, what you said about Howell, I was something I asked around at the combine. I'm like, what makes you think that like one game? What do you see? And he keeps on pointing out that look, if you look at his college grades,
Yeah.
year before he came out, he rated very high,
Mhm.
and above some of the guys who went that year in the draft, and
Right.
went back to school next year. So they feel like that there's something there. And I mean, there is something, but I'm
Yeah.
just like, I just don't know if it's
When?
ready yet.
Right.
It's a matter of when. I do think that the enemy will bring creativity. And because Howell isn't a statue and is a little bit bigger, I think there's going to be things that the enemy can do with him, that maybe he couldn't do with Heineke, that was limited or something like that, size wise. Durability probably helps a little bit. And look, they've got the wide receivers.
Mhm.
Um, you know, Tight end. I kind of would have liked to see them make a push for a real impactful tight end in free agency. And they didn't do that. Maybe you're doing, maybe they get somebody in the draft. I don't know. Because that that offense really needs, for Bieniemy, they feature the tight end
But
very well.
yeah.
And I
They
mean,
do like they do like their and I've had this discussion with a lot of people on here,
yeah,
but they do like their young tight ends. And so, and I think having those receivers lessens a little bit, but
yeah.
I wouldn't rule out something in the draft.
Right. Okay. Okay. So yeah, it'll be interesting. We don't know exactly what what his offense is exactly going to look like. Are we going to see ring around the rosies before that, goal line
Yeah.
situations or things like that? But I do think there's going to be a lot of creativity because every time that they had, even in the Super Bowl, those plays that they ran for those wide open touchdowns, they said, yeah, that was Bieniemy put that one in. Bieniemy, so if Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are giving him credit like that, I do think that we're going to see a little more spice, maybe, hopefully a little more consistency here and there than what they had.
Yeah, and I think having bread and butter plays would help them as well. And I never, in the
Right.
last 3 years, I never knew what the bread and butter plays were.
Right.
And then I think, I think there was always complaints from the offense. By the end of the year, it was unanimous. It felt unanimous as far as what guys were saying. And I think just having a new voice in there, a
Yeah.
demanding voice, will help.
Yes, exactly. I agree. It's about tone setting, and eventually, and I think, I mean, Scott did some creative things,
Yeah.
but I just think that it was time for a new voice, a new approach, maybe a little more discipline, um, you know, and I think that the credibility from where Bieniemy came from is
Right.
going to resonate with these guys. And I've sat down with him, I've spent a good amount of time with them, and I felt like, hey man, like I might be able to suit up. You know what I mean? So
Oh,
I think
yeah.
that he'll connect with these guys and pull something out of them, and really inspire. Whereas there was kind of like some bad blood with the previous play call.
There was not much inspiration.
Right.
You know what I mean? I
Right.
think guys need to feel energized by your game plan, by how you call plays. And it wasn't like everything was bad. There was a disconnect at times from
Right.
what they wanted to be versus what they were, what the head coach wanted, what the
Mm-hmm.
offensive coordinator wanted. And it just led to some issues. The other topic that everybody talked about with these guys is Lamar Jackson. Now, one thing is I think their salary cap right now is right around 3 million. So I don't think it was never really an option because I asked about that. But what have you thought about the whole Lamar situation and what do you think happens there?
Yeah, I was like, okay, if these owners really are colluding, which is what a lot of people think, and it certainly looks like it, I'm like, why doesn't Snyder give the finger to all these owners that want him out of there and go after Lamar and give him, but I was told, hey, it's not Dan making the
Right.
decisions on this. If Ron wanted him, they would go after him. And yes, the salary cap's a thing, and they have a plan in place. And even though Lamar would be great for this franchise and the market, it's not what Ron wants. And I know some people get upset when they hear that, like you don't really know, but no, I mean, you know, these people have had no reason to lie. But that's
It's
just not the vision that they have for this team.
no. And I think some of that too is like if they did well, if you went and got Lamar, who is an exciting player, everybody would agree with that. He'd be a blast to watch.
Mhm.
I think the feeling was Baltimore's going to match anyway. Like, unless you give him a fully guaranteed deal, which I don't think these
Right.
guys would do that. He's a running quarterback who's had 2 years of injuries. I don't think you're going to give him 230 million guaranteed. It just makes it tough. So then anything short of that, Baltimore's going to match. I think that's
Right.
what they've
Right.
always felt. And so, what people have to remember is that if you go out and if you have made them an offer sheet, you probably aren't signing Deron Payne because you don't
Right.
have the room to do that. You may have to do it after the fact, but when you sign that offer sheet, that during that stretch, you can't. That money comes off your cap, so they would have limited. And I think in their minds, then it's like, well, who aren't you going to be able to keep if you do this?
Right.
Because in a couple of years, those salaries are $50 or $60 million a year. So
Yeah.
what are you
Yeah.
going to do? And so I think all of that stuff added up. But I think a big thing was, I also think, Mike, like last year, they got burned by what they did,
Mhm.
going out and getting Wentz, and then kind of they've gone the other way, and they look at it like, well, the way to do it is with the rookie quarterback contract. That's what you got to do. But the guy's got to hit.
Yeah.
You've got to hit. And so I think there's belief, but also with that belief, there's a little bit of a leap of faith. So, I mean, it would be a blast to cover Lamar. I would just say, like, after what we've watched for a number of years to cover
Yeah.
him, one of the most exciting players in the NFL, it would be a blast. But it never was realistic here.
Yeah.
But what do you think happens? I mean, do you think has there been an assumption, and you know this better than me, but has there been an assumption that Baltimore would just match and they're just waiting on that?
Yeah, I was asking around, okay, what's a reasonable offer? And they said probably 3 years, 144 million, because that gets them at 45, 48 million.
Yeah,
But Baltimore would just match that.
right.
and so they don't see anybody do anything crazy. And again, these owners have basically said, hey, we're not going to do this. Okay. We're not having another Cleveland situation.
Right.
And so,
Browns got
and
to push their buttons.
Baltimore also knew that. That's why they didn't put, why they did the non-exclusive, because they knew they weren't really have competition for him. And so it's going to be interesting. I think I think we see a repeat of Kirk Cousins where he plays on the tag. Now, has he played 2 years? I don't know, but I think he plays on the tag and then, goes elsewhere. I don't know if it's 1 year or 2 years, but we'll see.
See, now that's where it's going to get interesting, because let's say he plays on the tag for 1 year, and then you have a new owner here, and you say, you know what, see how Sam Howell does. And if Howell doesn't
Right.
work out and you got this new owner, it's like, hey, let's sell some, who
Right.
knows?
Right.
And I don't like,
Yeah.
and it's just fun. This is just fun talk, but I
Right.
don't want
Just,
but but the thing with Baltimore too, I think the other factor that they felt here was there's no way Baltimore would let him come to Washington where
right.
you're
Right down
basically
the road.
fighting. There's
Yeah.
that middle line in Maryland where it's like, all these people they're Baltimore fans because of Lamar. Now they're going to
Right.
come down here. You're going to really let that happen? So there are all sorts of reasons. But like I said, it's never a matter of, is he a really good quarterback or not? It's a matter of, could you pull it off? Would Baltimore put the non-exclusive specifically so people would negotiate with them, so they could just sign them off
Right.
that? But it seems like, anyway, I don't, it would, but he would be fun to watch. I remember at the combine when he was being interviewed, I'm like, oh my God, I wish they like somehow get this guy because he'd just be fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. He would be.
Yeah.
There would light DC on fire.
Yeah.
It's fun to dream, but unfortunately,
Yeah. But it's,
that's all it is.
yep. So when does Aaron Rodgers get done, you think? Do you have any
Oh
clue?
man. I mean, you would think it's got to be around the draft, because I mean, if you're the Packers, you don't want to wait and drag this thing. People said, oh, they've got the leverage. They can drag this out. They don't have to pick up his option, until, September. But why not take a better pick now
Correct.
and risk
Right.
him being really good with them? And then your picks aren't as high. So I think that as we get close to the draft is when we'll see that they finally go ahead. So that way, because they know what you're getting as far as picks go. And then going from there. And also, the picks help you this year instead of agreeing, in
Right.
June, and those picks don't help you until another year. So
Right.
I think before the draft,
Mike, tell people where they can find you.
go to The Athletic. I'm also on Twitter at by Mike Jones, and Instagram at by Mike Jones, and that's where I'm at.
There we go. Thanks a lot, Mike. Got to get
All right,
some
man.
smoking done, man.
Yeah, man, I got a new barbecue book called The South's Best Butts.
Ooh.
It takes this tour through the South, but also has this whole area with like the sides. It's burnt in mac and cheese and all kinds of
really?
stuff. So I just got that. That's like, once we get past the draft, I'm gonna like dive into this thing and have a lot of fun and see.
There you go.
There we
Awesome.
go.
Thanks, man.
All right, I'll see you.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Mike for joining me, and thank you, as always, for listening. I'll be back with another podcast Tuesday night. YouTube show comes out that Monday morning. I'm going to kind of take a look at the owners' meetings, but also some other leftover tidbits, because I don't know at that point, will we have new information on the owners? I don't know. So there you go. I'll talk to you next time.